Kia ora everyone, welcome back to our next edition of Econ Talks. Gareth, we've seen a lot of talk in recent times about an effective energy crisis that's been emerging through in New Zealand. A lot of concerns about production, a lot of concerns about government intervention, a lot of concerns generally about, do we actually have enough power to keep New Zealand moving through at the moment? Now, this has come up a lot more the last couple of weeks, but certainly there were already sort of questions around some of those pricing elements and how the electricity market was already going to be proceeding over the next couple of years.
Yeah, well, it links back into some of the broader infrastructure issues we've got across the economy, where we don't seem to have invested enough in terms of maintaining or expanding the networks over time. And I think that's showing up in terms of the sort of approvals that the Commerce Commission has done for lines companies and Transpower in terms of their future capex requirements and spending requirements going forward. Now, the Commerce Commission having approved those plans through coming in 2025, estimates whether that was going to push up your average household power bill by around about $15 a month. So quite a significant cost increase already coming through. But you overlay that now with a lack of generation available across the country. Yes, the hydro lakes are low. Yes, we haven't had a great deal of wind as well. But the reality is, with the sort of constraints around oil and gas that have been under the previous government, that's sort of having impacts now in terms of the sort of supply of gas, which is used, of course, at those peak times when we need power in the middle of winter, at sort of breakfast time and dinner time, when households are really burning through that electricity, but we just don't have the capacity to meet it, and it is causing issues. Particularly when we turn away from households and think about businesses, of course, at the moment, businesses tend to be more exposed to those sort of wholesale price fluctuations than households. Now, not necessarily directly exposed immediately, but we know that as businesses come up to sort of have their contracts renegotiated in coming months. Look, power prices over the last 12 months, on average, even before the crisis really became news, have been at their highest on record. Surpassed previous highs. They were quite low through 2020 and 2021, but a lot higher now. And so that is really impacting on business profitability and will continue to impact on it going forward, particularly when you overlay it with those other charges that we already knew about coming through. So no sort of end in sight or clear end in sight to those sort of issues at the moment. And then, the question I think then becomes, well, what is the government going to do in response to the issues that they've got out there?
Well, and that's a challenge. There's not a lot of easy responses. I mean, gas production is down 20% over the last year, far lower than people had sort of expected. We'd already been seeing those trends come in over time. But like you say, that sort of quite large reduction in gas, coupled with some of the lowest hydro lakes on levels in recent times, if we go back, on the records. At the same time, again, that wind production not really up there. And so you've got almost a bit of a classic dry year problem happening at the same time as your gas, which, like you say, is not only used for peaking capacity, but also a lot of the production across the economy really being squeezed. Now, I mean, let's be clear, we're not facing blackouts at the moment. Households are not going to lose connection, and that's sort of, encouraging for the moment. But there are certainly risks. Obviously, you're seeing that play out with production. A lot of processes and sort of, wood product processes through Ruapehu district, for example, say they're not able to operate because those costs have just got so high. You've had a demand response already come through for Tiwai Point. They've sort of, closed and shuttered some of their operations so that the power comes back into the grid. The likes of there's been a bit of a change so that some of the contingent storage of water that normally can't be let out unless there's an emergency, that's now sort of able to be drawn down on a bit more. Doesn't really solve your long-term problem if you haven't got enough water in the lakes and you draw some of your emergency reserve down now. At some point, if you don't refill it, then you still don't have that energy. And of course, even Methanex and New Plymouth has gone, well, look, actually, we're better to sell our smaller than we want, but allocation of gas still to ensure that they're actually going to make more money by selling the gas back to produce energy than they would if they were producing methanol. So a huge range of changes there that have been coming through. We'll talk about the production side in a minute. Government, of course, has come up with a number of things that they want to do into the future. They want to make it easier to generate a lot more and put forward more investment into generation, some tweaks to the RMA, the fast track and similar. That's useful, but again, not going to sort of work instantaneously to bring more production to bear. Generation won't be changing overnight. There's also been, of course, talk of potentially importing natural gas into the country, and then you can chuck that through the pipes and you can start to burn it up, and then you get a bit more energy production. Again, not quite so simple as just bringing a ship in and pumping it off the edge. This is maybe a 3 to 5 year project, probably hundreds of millions of dollars or so that it would cost. Now, government has said that they will, if they need to, and they're looking likely at it, they will just legislate consents for that. No RMA, no fast track. Government, Parliament will just pass laws that say it's all good. We're sort of back to think big back in time to produce that. Again, 3 to 5 years doesn't help us in the short term. And so a lot of those government changes are unlikely to sort of affect any real change in the near term. I am glad, though, that the government hasn't decided to go through and try and regulate prices, which, there was a little bit of an implicit threat there at points, only because at the moment, prices are sort of working in the right way. They're saying that there is higher demand relative to supply. Price signal then goes up. That means that generators are going, well, actually, I'm better to start investing a bit more money, providing some more generation over the next couple of years, because then I will get that higher price, and so it will pay itself off. The difficulty is that investment signal seems to come a little bit too late. You haven't seen as much investment the last couple of years. Sure, a lot of the providers are saying, look, we're looking to ramp up generation. That's true, but it's not going to help us now. And so there is a real challenge there. I also don't think, because there's a lot of talk of what are the causes of this, Gareth, right? And you look at some of the conversation about the likes of the ending of the oil and gas ban coming through a few years back. Realistically, that did not change things. Gas production has been falling already. We haven't found a big new gas field and been able to exploit it in the last decade or so. Probably didn't help in terms of maintenance and upkeep, sure, but I don't think it's caused the crisis. A lot less helpful, though, was the previous government's Lake Onslow project, which took up more than or around about 50% of expected additional generation capacity over the next decade. Now, to be fair, if I'm a energy producer, I'm going, why should I put my money into making more generation asset when the government's going to do half the job for me anyway? I mean, it was just so big, it sort of took things out. So a huge amount in there. We don't have enough energy at the moment. We can't immediately bring a whole lot more to bear. People are seeing that demand response already on the business side, so that sort of frees up a little bit more through the middle, but it's expensive, it's costly, and it's not doing anything great for the economy. Gareth, all this has come through more in sort of July, August. Now, we were already expecting a pretty, not great look for the second quarter in terms of GDP. What did that look like already, and what are we thinking for the future? How bad might this get?
Yeah, so June quarter GDP, we're picking to be down 0.1% from the previous quarter, or down 0.2% from where it was a year ago. So that's effectively the economy contracting over the space of 12 months. And we know, look, growth has been in and out of negative territory for probably 18 months now. Expectations looking forward, even before the electricity crisis coming through, were that growth would still remain patchy from now through probably until the middle of next year. This is probably, if anything, just going to sort of deepen the negative numbers in the near term, because we do have producers and manufacturers and other businesses scaling back their production because there is not the supply of energy there for them to actually be able to do that work. Yes, okay, demand conditions have been down across the economy, so things were in a bit of a contractionary phase anyway, but this is a sort of a whole new layer over the top of that. So it could well be that you get economic growth in the second half of this year. Maybe instead of minus 0.1 or minus 0.2, you're talking minus 0.5 or minus 0.6 because of the lack of energy and the lack of ability for businesses to progress forward. And the problem is with that lost production, you never get it back. It's a sort of a hole there that is gone because you weren't able to have your businesses running. It's not good news, I guess, in terms of the sort of ability for the economy to recover. It's not good news, particularly in terms of the labour market, I think, too. We've seen reports and, the likes of Raitahi, for example, being really hard hit as the mill closes and those jobs are potentially lost. And we know that households have been under sort of significant pressure anyway with that softening labour market. This just adds another sort of component to it, which is going to weigh, I think, on sort of people's willingness to spend going forward as well. So it just adds to what was already a difficult economic situation. Yes, interest rates have started to come down, but again, that impact is not going to be felt. That positive impact is not going to be felt for some time either. So, yeah, just a bit more pessimism. We thought there was a bit of light at the end of the tunnel in terms of where the economy was going, but this does make that tunnel maybe just a little bit longer.
Totally, and when you look at some of our recent figures, we were looking at employment by different sort of types of economies. Metros, provincials, rurals. Rural areas already had much slower employment growth than the likes of provincial or metro areas. So this sort of blow is just another one on top of what like you say, was already a sort of tough gig. I mean, and the importance, particularly to the manufacturing sector, is substantial. We've sort of run some numbers to try and understand the implications sort of by industry. The likes of primary metal manufacturing takes up about sort of 17% of its costs from electricity or natural gas. Again, sort of chemical manufacturing about 14%, dairy product manufacturing about 10%, that pulp and paper in that sort of 6-7%. Even supermarkets have about 5% of their costs coming from energy. So those increases, and they are substantial. In some places they are double. Gosh, in some other areas you're hearing some insane growth numbers, means that again everything is contracted back. And I guess the worry also is that not only might we lose that production forever, but in some areas, if you lose entire producing assets, if you see businesses that go under or close up shop, you hear concerns coming out of the far north as well with some of their producers through Ruapehu, sort of through the entire North Island. That really does start to put the crunch a lot more on what was an already depressed sort of economic environment. We'll continue to assess how the energy market goes, how quickly we might actually be able to get some more generation started, and importantly, what it means for economic activity right now and into the future on one of our future editions of Econ Talks.